a 5-year-old girl, locked in a dark closet. She weighed just 21 pounds, covered in lice, starving, crying, until her voice disappeared forever. And the worst part? Her own mother did it. Her grandmother helped. Her mother's boyfriend watched and said nothing. This isn't fiction. This isn't a horror movie. This is real. Her name was Kinsleigh Welty, and by the time help arrived, it was already too late. What happened in that house will make you sick, but you need to know it because the system that was supposed to save her failed her. So don't scroll. Don't look away. Because if we forget her story, another child just like her could be next. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. This documentary contains graphic descriptions of child abuse, neglect, and emotional trauma that may be disturbing to some audiences. Kinsleigh Welty was born on December 3rd, 2018. A bright-eyed girl who loved singing Taylor Swift's "You Need to Calm Down" and watching Paw Patrol. She had a smile that could light up a room, and like any 5-year-old, she should have been celebrating birthdays with cake and laughter. But the reality of her life was nothing like the pictures her family posted online. The truth was hidden behind closed doors, and it was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Toni McClure was Kinsleigh's mother, but she never acted like one. She had a long history with Child Protective Services, reports of neglect, emotional abuse, and unstable relationships. CPS removed Kinsleigh before, but she always ended up back with Toni. Each time, promises were made. Each time, those promises were broken. Then came Ryan Smith, Toni's boyfriend. He wasn't Kinsleigh's father. He didn't love her. He didn't even help her. And finally, there was Tammy Halsey, Toni's own mother, Kinsleigh's grandmother, a woman who should have protected her. Instead, she became part of the horror. In 2020, Toni McClure was convicted of neglecting her daughter, Kinsleigh Welty. She served 21 days in jail and was placed on probation for 540 days. Despite this conviction, Child Protective Services returned Kinsleigh to her mother's care in 2021. This decision was made following a policy that prioritized family reunification, even as her grandparents warned that she wasn't safe. After returning to her mother's care, Kinsleigh lived with her mother, grandmother Tammy Halsey, and her mother's boyfriend, Ryan Smith. Her living conditions deteriorated, and she was subjected to severe neglect and abuse. Kinsleigh was confined to a closet in her family's home for extended periods, denied adequate food and water, and suffered from malnourishment. Brightway Street, that's where Kinsleigh lived, but no one really saw her. The neighbors didn't hear laughter. The yard was always quiet. The windows were always closed. She didn't go to school. She didn't go outside. She lived like a secret. And secrets, as we've learned, can be deadly. This is where the truth becomes unbearable. Kinsleigh wasn't just neglected. She was locked away in a closet for days, for weeks, feces on the floor, urine-soaked blankets, scratches on the wall, from little fingers trying to get out. Sometimes they fed her, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes she cried until she didn't have the strength anymore. She lived her final days in that closet, and when the door finally opened, it was too late. Kinsleigh Welty's case exposes a horrifying truth. The system designed to protect her failed at every turn. Child Protective Services had multiple chances to intervene. Reports of neglect had been filed. Concerns about malnutrition were documented. Bruises were noted. Yet, Each time, Kinsleigh was sent back to the same house of horrors. The warnings were there, but no one listened. Indiana's CPS has been under scrutiny for years. Caseworkers often juggle dozens of investigations at once, stretched thin by overwhelming caseloads and limited resources. One anonymous caseworker admitted, "We're drowning in cases. Sometimes we miss things, and kids pay the price." This wasn't just a mistake. It was systemic neglect. Policies meant to keep families together sometimes do the opposite, prioritizing reunification over a child's safety. Records show CPS visited Kinsleigh's home multiple times. Each visit should have been a chance to see the truth, the filth, the starvation, the isolation. Instead, caseworkers left without removing her. The signs were there, her tiny body wasting away, her silence, the desperation in her eyes. But the system moved too slowly. Bureaucracy buried her cries for help under paperwork and protocols. Her great-aunt, Carrie Hogan, saw the danger. She called CPS repeatedly, begging them to take action. She knew what was happening behind closed doors, but the system didn't act fast enough. By the time investigators finally realized the severity of the situation, Kinsleigh was already gone. Her death wasn't just tragic, it was preventable. Indiana isn't alone in this problem. Nationwide, CPS agencies struggle under funding shortages and high turnover. Caseworkers burn out. Cases slip through the cracks. Children fall through the gaps. The same warnings are ignored. The same red flags dismissed. Kinsleigh's story is heartbreaking, but it's not unique. Other children suffer the same fate every year. Kids who could have been saved if someone had just paid attention. Experts argue that systemic change is needed. More workers, better training, stronger policies that put children first. But change comes too late for Kinsleigh and others like her. Her death should have been a wake-up call, a turning point. Yet years later, the same failures still occur. The cruelest irony, the people who were supposed to protect Kinsleigh, her family, CPS, the courts, were the very ones who failed her. Her life ended because no one fought hard enough to save her. And until the system changes, there will be more children just like her, waiting for help that never comes. Kinsleigh's case forces us to ask, how many more warnings will go ignored? How many more children have to suffer before things really change? Her story isn't just about one little girl. It's about every child trapped in a broken system, every voice that wasn't heard in time. Tony McClure, in text messages revealed by investigators, described Kinsleigh as evil and not mine. These messages showed a chilling detachment from her role as a mother. Rather than viewing Kinsleigh as a vulnerable child needing care, she referred to her as an unwanted responsibility. One message read, "She's not mine. I wish she was gone." This language points to deep resentment and a lack of empathy. The decision to confine Kinsleigh in a closet, covered in her own waste, starved and sometimes duct-taped, was about control. Tony and Tammy used confinement as punishment. The abuse escalated from neglect to dehumanization. Tammy, the grandmother, appeared complicit. She encouraged punishments via text, including tying Kinsleigh down and taping her mouth shut. In one message, Tony asked Tammy to do your duct tape thing, indicating this was a routine punishment. These adults did not hide what they were doing from each other. They openly discussed it, joked about it, and coordinated it. This normalization of cruelty shows they likely enabled one another's behavior, feeding a cycle of escalating abuse. Ryan Smith, while less vocal, never intervened. He knew about the closet. He knew she was starving. He chose to stay silent, and his inaction helped make the abuse continuous and fatal. The house on Brightway Street in Indianapolis was a disaster zone. Police described it as filled with trash, rotting food, and crawling insects. The filth was overwhelming, but nothing compared to what they discovered in the back bedroom. There, a heavy dresser blocked the closet door. Inside was Kinsleigh's prison. The closet's floor space was smaller than a standard bathroom stall. The walls were smeared with fecal handprints, scratches on the wall from little fingers trying to get out. Sometimes they fed her, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes she cried, until she didn't have the strength anymore. A stale peanut butter sandwich sat on the floor, untouched. There was no bed, just a dirty blanket and a corner where Kinsleigh was forced to sleep, eat, and relieve herself. Her brother later told investigators that she had her own corner in that closet, a place where she was left alone for hours, sometimes days, with nothing but silence and the darkness pressing in. She lived her final days in that closet, and when the door finally opened, it was too late. On April 9th, 2024, Tony McClure finally made a desperate 911 call after her daughter, 5-year-old Kinsleigh Welty, collapsed and began making gurgling sounds. By the time emergency responders arrived at the home on Brightway Street, the reality was horrifying. Kinsleigh was found unresponsive, severely malnourished, and lying in filth. Her tiny frame weighed just 21 pounds, the same as a toddler. When EMTs entered, they found 5-year-old Kinsleigh Welty curled in a closet, surrounded by the stench of human waste. Her ribs pressed sharply against her skin, her limbs frail and bird-like. Paramedics who lifted her later described how her bones felt dangerously fragile, a sign of the severe starvation she had endured. EMS rushed her to Riley Hospital for Children, but it was too late. Despite her mother's last-minute call for help, Kinsleigh's body had already endured irreversible damage from weeks, if not months, of starvation and abuse. The autopsy confirmed what first responders already suspected. Kinsleigh died from profound malnourishment and prolonged neglect. Her organs had begun to shut down. Her hair was matted with feces and teeming with lice. Bruises marked her legs, and sores and bite marks covered her abdomen. The skin on her body showed the unmistakable signs of ongoing abuse and unsanitary living conditions. Her stomach was nearly empty, just a few crumbs of stale food, likely scavenged from the closet floor. Investigators turned to her 8-year-old brother for answers about her final days. He told them she didn't talk much. She just sat in the closet. First responders were shaken. One veteran EMT who had seen countless tragedies later said, "I've seen a lot, but this was different." The air inside the house was thick with the odor of urine and mold. The closet door bore the evidence of Kinsleigh's final struggle, scratches starting at waist height and trailing down as if she had slid to the floor, exhausted. Perhaps the most haunting detail was noted in the coroner's report. Kinsleigh's fingernails were worn down to the quick, not from biting, but from scraping at the door for months on end. Her last moments were spent in isolation and despair, her voice silenced long before her heart finally stopped. When paramedics arrived, her body was still warm. She had been gone less than an hour. Just days after Kinsleigh Welty's death, the arrests followed swiftly, an overdue reckoning for the unimaginable cruelty inflicted on a 5-year-old child. Her mother, Toni McClure, was charged with murder, criminal confinement, aggravated battery, and neglect resulting in death. Ryan Smith, her mother's boyfriend, faced charges for neglect resulting in death and failure to protect. And Tammy Halsey, Kinsleigh's own grandmother, was charged with neglect, criminal conspiracy, and aiding and abetting child abuse. When the charges were read aloud in court, the atmosphere was tense and raw. The judge's expression, stiff with controlled fury, reflected the gravity of the case. Community members watched in horror, many through tears, others through clenched fists, as the truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a case of misunderstanding or missed signs. It was deliberate, devastating, and brutally cruel. As of now, the sentencing for Toni McClure, Ryan Smith, and Tammy Halsey in connection with the death of 5-year-old Kinsleigh Welty has not been publicly disclosed. The legal proceedings are ongoing, and trial dates have been set for June 20th, 2025. Toni McClure faces charges including murder, criminal confinement resulting in serious bodily injury, and battery on a person under 14. Ryan Smith has been charged with 3 counts of neglect resulting in death and criminal confinement. Tammy Halsey faces multiple counts of neglect and 1 count of failing to report abuse. The outcomes of these trials will determine their sentencing. People in the community were heartbroken and angry. They gathered for vigils and protests outside the Indiana State House, holding signs with Kinsleigh's picture and calling for justice. Her great-aunt started a GoFundMe to help with funeral costs, and it raised nearly $7,000. Proof that many wanted to honor her and show she mattered. In court, the truth was hard to hear. Witnesses talked about the filthy closet Kinsleigh was kept in and how skinny and weak she was. Prosecutors showed photos and read cruel messages from McClure and Halsey. The judge agreed that McClure should face life in prison without the chance of parole. The trial for all 3 is set for June 20th, 2025, a step toward justice, though many feel it came too late. After Kinsleigh Welty's death, defense lawyers tried to shift the blame, saying the accused were stressed or overwhelmed. But the facts told a different story. This wasn't just a moment of bad judgment. It was long, ongoing abuse. The court saw clear evidence in text messages and in the horrible condition of the closet where Kinsleigh was kept. Everyone in the courtroom felt the weight of what had happened, knowing that nothing could undo the years of pain Kinsleigh had lived through. In response, lawmakers quickly introduced new bills to change how the child protection system works. They called it Kinsleigh's Law. The law called for tougher punishments, better oversight of CPS, and public reporting of active cases. People rallied around the bill, signing petitions, protesting, and sharing Kinsleigh's story. Her death became a symbol of a broken system and a warning that real change is needed before more children fall through the cracks. Kinsleigh, may you finally rest where there's no more pain, no more fear. You were only 5, and the world failed you in every way it could. Your silent strength speaks louder than words. You weren't just a child. You were meant to be someone's whole world. Instead, they locked you away in darkness no child should ever face. Now, we speak for you. You'll never be forgotten. If Kinsleigh's story touched your heart, don't let it be forgotten. Liking this video doesn't mean you support what happened. It means you stand for justice, awareness, and change. Comment below with your thoughts. Every voice matters. Share this video to keep her memory alive, because silence allowed her suffering to continue for too long. Subscribe to Secrets in the Shadows for more stories the world needs to hear. Turn on notifications and never miss the truth hiding in plain sight. I'm Charlotte, and I'll see you in my next video.